All right, so here we are with video number 2 of driving the 1987 air-cooled 911. Yep. So as you can see, the pedals are actually hinged to the floor. When you haven't driven these cars, that's one thing you'll notice right away, that you got to get used to it. So the pedals aren't going underneath the dash, they're coming in and out of the floor. So it could be a little tricky if you're not used to it with the clutch pedal.
There's no power steering on this.
No power steering.
And since the car's not warmed up yet, I got to shift a little slowly.
Right.
But as it warms up, it gets a little better. And I'm actually planning on replacing the gearbox oil soon. So with Mobile 1, that should make it a little bit smoother.
Nice.
Yeah, it might be loud for your camera with the windows.
Yeah.
But if you get hot, let me know. We can put the air conditioning.
Okay.
I might have had the heat on a little bit before.
So the clock still works.
Yep.
It's from 1987.
Yep, everything works.
Yep.
And there's not too much about this car to break, which is one of the things I love about it. It's so simple.
Right.
And it's easy to fix on your own, for the most part. And there's some things that you would probably want to have a lift to work on the car properly, but I was able to do a lot of things in my garage just with jacks and stuff like that.
Nice. So the biggest thing with the air-cooled cars, besides being older Visceral cars, is the sound, right? The sound that you're hearing now with the engine, you don't get that in the water-cooled cars. It's muffled.
Yeah, and it's pretty quiet now, but when you start revving it up, you definitely hear it. You hear a lot of induction noise and exhaust. And I've actually replaced the engine sound pad in this car when I did the AC. So this is kind of what it would be like if it was new. When I first got the car, it was much louder in here just because it was so deteriorated.
Oh, okay.
But this is, pretty civilized.
Right. Yep.
If you're just like driving around at low RPM, it's a pretty civilized car.
Yeah.
Once it warms up a little bit and we get a little more room, we can rev it up a little bit. But, it rides pretty firm. But, on sort of wavy roads where it's not like harsh bumps, it does ride pretty smooth for its age.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the ride is very good. And this is with the sports suspension.
Yeah.
So I assume with the base suspension, it would be
even smoother.
But the sports suspension I had when I had my 996 C4S, and there's definitely a big difference in handling. I mean, it's stiffer, but not too stiff.
And to be fair, this is 1987 suspension technology.
Right.
It has torsion bars.
Okay.
These are the original shocks. This I've updated things, to keep it reliable or fix things that are broken, but it's essentially a stock car. I'm sure you could get a Coney shocks, set up, and it would be light years ahead of the technology of what's in here now. But I kind of like having the original driving experience, having it just be a nice car.
Right, it's almost like a time capsule. This is how, in 1987, this car was ahead of its time by far.
By the way, I have a copy of the original window sticker. This car was $48,000 in 1987.
Wow, and that was a lot of money.
Yeah, that's like $100,000 today, which is interesting because now at 911 you can't even get for $100,000.
Right.
I mean, you could until not that long ago, but I don't think you can now.
And these cars didn't have, it's not like Porsches today with, the base price is $80,000 and you add $20,000 worth of options. These cars came pretty much one way. I know,
this car does have a lot of options, though. Having the 16-inch wheels and the aero, the spoilers and the limited slip, and even what you saw in the trunk before, that velour carpeting was an option.
Oh, wow.
That's like a more luxurious carpeting with like nice edges.
Oh, nice.
Otherwise, you would have had this like felt that looks like it should belong in a Volkswagen.
I know the window sticker on my 993 Turbo, which is a 96, is like 104.
Oh, okay.
So, so I mean, 48 was expensive then, but...
This also has a driver's side power seat and a mechanical seat.
Oh, wow.
Passenger side.
Nice. Yeah, you can really hear we're probably going about 60, but you can really hear the engine noises. That's the benefit of the air-cooled 911s. You won't get that sound on a water-cooled one.
Yeah.
I mean, the H6, the flat 6 motor, sounds great in every 911, but the air-cooled, they're certainly another level with sound. And, the more you hear the sound, it adds to the visceral experience where, you don't have to be necessarily going that fast, but you're going to feel like you're going that fast because you got all the sounds and everything happening around you.
This is not a fast car by modern standards, but it's plenty quick for me.
Do you know what the 0 to 60 is on this car?
It's probably in 6 seconds.
Yeah. So I mean, that's not slow. It's not the, we did a test of the Audi R8 V10, which is probably like 3 seconds to 60. Yeah. So it's not that, but that's not slow for,
I'm having fun when I'm driving 40 miles an hour.
Yeah, exactly. This car is fun at any speed.
And the G50 gearbox is just modern enough to make it not too much of a chore to shift, although some people do prefer the 915.
Right.
They like the sort of lighter feel of it. That one does not have a hydraulic clutch. This does.
Okay.
The 915 has, just a more engaging feel, I guess you would say. This is a little slicker, but the 915 is a little more fragile too. So
now this car, so the 915 was also a 5-speed like the G50.
Yeah.
The G50 went from the Porsche transmission to the Carrera transmission, and the 6-speed came out for the 993s, which came in 95.
Yeah.
You can go right here if you want.
The brakes, they're not. It has power brakes, but there's not that much assist, and it's not like the R8, that's for sure.
Yeah, mine's like that too. Power brakes, but you really got to press them.
Yeah, and they're pretty good for what they are.
Yeah. Now this car has how many miles on it?
85,000 miles.
And just sitting here in the passenger seat, if this car had 20,000 miles, I'd believe it.
Yeah, it's pretty solid. There's no squeaks and rattles.
The build quality is so good on any of these air-cooled 911s that if you find a good one that's been maintained, keep going straight.
Okay.
It'll be around forever. This is a good road because you got a lot of turns.
Okay.
It's the opposite. We took this road, but in the opposite direction.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And this car's probably worth what today? In the 40s, probably.
High 40s.
Yeah. So I mean, if it was 48 new, however many years later it is, 30-something years, 30.
I mean, some of these cars are now, the G50s are going in the 50s now. So I don't know. I'm not sure exactly where this car falls in the market. I would say it's a really nice driver. It has, a few things like little rock chips in the front that would make it shy of like a perfect concourse car. But, I like it. It's pretty nice. It's nicer than most of the ones I see.
Right.
And I want to keep it that way. And I think I'll have it for a really long time, if not forever.
Yeah, I mean, if, say it was 48, let's just say it's worth 48 now, for argument's sake. 30 years have passed, or 29 years have passed, and this car's worth, with 80,000 miles on it, over 80,000 miles, it's worth the same as it was new, right?
Yeah.
And how many modern cars, with dual clutch transmissions and big maintenance bills because they're so expensive, they'll never be worth in 30 years what they are today. No. Unless it's a Survivor with 5,000 miles on it. You're not going to find a 90,000 mile R8 one day with a dual clutch that's going to be worth 160,000, right? It's never going to happen.
And this car, used to be pretty cheap for a while.
Yeah.
For what it is, but it's come back.
Yep.
The thing about these cars, though, is you can fix everything. The cars of today, I'm worried that in 20 years or even 30, you're not going to be able to even get the parts that you need to fix these ultra-digital cars.
Right, especially with all the electronic suspensions. You're seeing them fail now on Mercedes that are 10 years old, 12 years old, 15 years old.
Yeah. So that's the great thing about this car, and you can easily work on it in a garage. It does have a computer, but it's a simple computer that runs the fuel injection. It's a Motronic fuel injection. It's nothing really exotic, it's just Bosch parts. And there's enough of a following of these cars that people, there's a good availability of parts.
Yep. If you want, you can go straight here and then go straight here, and I'll loop you around.
The problem is, though, the parts have gotten a little more expensive as these cars have gotten more popular.
Yeah.
That's all right.
There's plenty of mechanics, though, that fix air-cooled Porsches. Like, I take mine to a local guy. I want to take it to the dealer because they don't necessarily have somebody who's used to working on air-cooled cars.
Yeah.
And so, find a good independent mechanic who specializes in air-cooled Porsches, and you'll be fine.
Yeah. I try to do most of the work myself, but, occasionally I need to have a mechanic do something, and then it's not too bad.
Right. If you're handy, make a left when it comes up here. The operating cost would probably be, minimal. You can run these cars on the cheap, so to speak, because you figure the brakes aren't big, the wheels are 15 or 16-inch wheels. Another G-Wagon. So we've been driving. We've been driving this road maybe, 10, 15 minutes, and this is the third G-Wagon we've seen.
Yeah. They grow on trees around here.
Yeah. You can see my G-Wagon video. I'll leave a link to it. But here we got some back roads, and this is where this car really shines. It is a learning experience. If you're used to driving a modern car and going into a turn as fast as you want, this is a different experience than that. Yeah. With the rear engine, it's really slow in, fast out. Yeah. So you really want to. The front of the car is very light, especially in these earlier models. You notice it the most if you were going downhill and had to slam on the brakes. Yeah. That's where you feel that the back end's going to come around and get you. Yeah. And this is a rear drive model, unlike my turbo that's all-wheel drive. So this you even feel that even more. But going into the corners slow, hitting the apex, and then with the rear engine, that really gives you traction on those rear wheels, and you can get the gas on the gas a lot earlier than, say, your typical rear-wheel drive car and really rock it out of that corner.
Yeah, and I find it to be pretty stable for the most part. It's not trying to kill me.
Right.
But, I do drive this car, not ultra fast and like a crazy person. So, it is my own car, and I want to take care of it. But, as long as you're mindful of weight management and not stabbing on the throttle or lifting in the middle of a fast turn, you'll be fine.
And make the next left that comes up here, and that'll bring us back. And also with these older ones, you can really see the headlights, how they kind of stick out in the front fender here. Yeah. And that's really just like the classic 911 look.
Yeah. This car is still pretty quick on the highway, though. I mean, if you're cruising at 60, 65, 70, you can put your foot down even in fifth gear, and it moves out pretty good. The one thing about this car, you might notice I'm not doing a lot of heel and toe downshifting, which is a little difficult, which I like to do, but the way the pedals are set up, it's hard because the brake pedal is so much higher than the gas pedal, and the way they did that is so that if you're driving it really hard on the track and you're really putting your foot down, then it's easier to do a heel toe blip, but on the road you're just not using the brakes enough to get it down that far to easily do a blip with the side of your foot. So it's difficult in most circumstances. Some people do modifications to the pedals to make it a little easier to do it on the road, but I haven't done that. It's not really that necessary for most of the driving that I'm doing, and occasionally I can get it right, but it's a little more challenging.
And like your air conditioning system is different than mine. Mine will have like a Celsius counter here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, mine's a little easier. Yeah, this I don't think I can figure out.
This is where you actually turn on the the air conditioning. This is for the top one is for fresh air blowing. Then you have the thing that distributes the air up or down.
Yep, I can feel it up now. I can feel it.
And then this one is one at the bottom is to control your heat distribution. And to actually open the heat, you have to use these levers down here between the seats, like an old Volkswagen.
Gotcha.
So it's pretty complex, but it's kind of fun to have that character, I guess.
Nice.
It's not the most easy to figure out thing, but and there's still people that own these cars that on the internet you see them, they won't quite know how to use their own climate control system, and even I struggle with it sometimes.
Yeah, I'm one of those. I'm sure there's a way to do it, but I can usually have it on full blast or off.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a way to be in between.
Yeah, and this is the actual temperature control here, but it's not like you can set it to a specific temperature. It turns off the the compressor once it reaches its certain level of coldness based on the sensor that's in the condenser. Sorry, the evaporator.
Okay. Yeah, like mine is actually probably like the first version of the auto climate control. You can set it on the temperature, but then it's it goes either on or off, and you really hear it coming on and off. It works, but I think that's just how it was back then. Now these make popular track cars. One thing about Porsche, you can literally drive this car to the track, do a track day all day, and drive it home. So everything is over-engineered. The brakes won't fade. The car is very reliable. It can really take heavy track use, and that's why if you go to an autocross or a track day, not even a Porsche Club track day, there's a million air-cooled 911s that have been turned into track cars.
Yeah. nowadays, if you have a really nice one, it's probably not worth turning.
Yeah, and I think that's why, you know, they were cheap for a long time, let's say 25,000 or whatever they were. And because they were so cheap and such a visceral car, it made sense to make it a track day car, you know, because it's going to be your weekend car anyway.
Yeah.
And these cars perform great in the track. Very few, even I used to track a lot of Corvettes, and, you know, 5 laps in, once you learn how to drive, you know, the brakes would fade once you become a good driver and you really need to lean on those brakes. You notice how your street car is not set up for the track.
Yeah.
Where a Porsche, whether it's a Boxster, Cayman, air-cooled 911, they really are, out of the box, could be your track car. I mean, even better if you got a water-cooled GT3, but you really don't need that these cars are so over-engineered, they can take that, it's not even beating to them. I remember with my 996 C4S doing autocross and track days all day, and where my Z06 would start to get hot and overheat, I would open the engine compartment on the 911, it'd be cold.
Yeah.
It would be, you know, the temperature didn't move all day, pounding the car at the track.
One thing I should mention, you know, these cars work great at high RPMs. They have a lot of power, and you know, they really move out above 4,000 RPM, but they do have a fair amount of torque at the lower RPM, where you could just drive, you know, in third gear through a turn and not have to downshift a second, and it pulls through smoothly, so it is pretty civilized.
Nice. Yeah, the fun of these cars is definitely revving them out.
Yeah.
You know, these cars redline at about 6,000 RPM, and the needle moves pretty fast from 4 to 6.
And it's still pulling at the red line. You know, you do have to pay attention and shift at the right time, or else it'll keep going. I've never hit a rev limiter on this car.
I don't know if they have one.
I don't know if they have one either, and I don't want to find out in the wrong way. So
I know I used to track a couple, before I had the Z06, a couple C4 Corvettes. There was no rev limiter on that. If you missed a downshift, it would go to the moon.
So, I mean, there are people that have done things with the motors where you can have a higher red line.
Right, and idle's really low, about just under 1,000 RPM.
Yeah, it should be about like 850-ish.
Yeah.
You can get a chip for this car. There's a guy called Steve Wong.
Oh yeah,
and
I've heard of that.
He makes a really well-renowned chip, and it adds about 30 horsepower, and it actually refines the map on the car to kind of make it so that the lower RPM is kind of blends into the higher RPM a little bit better. I guess you sort of get a bit more power at the lower end, so you don't have that sort of difference where it starts really pulling at the top.
Okay.
You get more power at the lower end, so it's more linear. But it also kind of improves, it's supposed to improve the fuel economy and the idle, which is not rock solid on these cars. It's, you know, it will kind of waver a little bit.
That's a lot, 30 horsepower gain on a normally aspirated motor.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
Yeah, no, I believe it.
I just think that Porsche tuned these cars pretty conservatively in the 80s. They had less power in the US by a little bit compared to the European cars. I think some of it was because of the gasoline that we had here at that time.
Right, they have higher octane, right?
Yeah, it just wasn't as good, but I think nowadays you can get better gas, and you know, there's also, you know, Steve Wong spending a bit more time on the tuning, and Bosch, you know, Porsche would keep it pretty conservative, so that way if you're in the middle of nowhere with terrible gas, you're not going to ruin anything, not going to ping or anything.
Well, you're convincing me to go out and buy one.
Well, you already have one.
I know.
But yeah, if you can still get your hands on a 1980s Carrera or even an SC at a good deal these days, you know, they're still going up. So, and they're great cars.
Now, the SC was in the early 80s, and what year did
It was
the SC?
78 to 83.
Okay.
And that was a 3-liter.
Yep, and these are the 3.2s.
Yeah, they're pretty similar. I mean, they have a CIS injection, which is a bit more convoluted and not as nice as the Motronic, but they still have almost as much power. They're lighter, actually. They look pretty much exactly the same.
Right.
The seats are a little different, but I mean, there's not too much different with those cars. And you could tune one to have just as much power as this car probably. The 1 to 2 shift is a little slower than the rest, and I probably could shift it faster, but it just doesn't seem like, you know, it wants to do it too fast. I've heard that with some of the better transmission fluid, which I will soon be adding the mobile Delvac transmission fluid. The 1 to 2 shift is a bit slicker.
Oh, okay.
So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But, yeah, now we're back in the traffic. So.
Yep. Well, we'll probably end it here. This was a great drive in a 1987 911. Be sure to subscribe and share this video to grow our subscriber base. We appreciate your support. And remember, subscribe, new videos posted every day.